Welcome to the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy, such as the Deferred Sales Trust, is the best way for you to grow your wealth. I'm your host, Brett Swarts. In each episode, I am joined by some of the best real estate, financial, and wealth minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration, so together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's the founder and CEO of the 1031 Investor. He's a degreed accountant and serial real estate investor who is a qualified intermediary and consultant for tax saving strategies such as the 1031 exchange and the Section 121 homestead exemption. He started fixing and flipping properties in the 90s and realized that about 40% of his profits were going directly to the IRS. And so he tells his story, tells us about the updated rules and regulations among the 1031 exchanges, and he's going to also share how to legally compound your tax interest that will stay with you instead of going straight to the government. Please welcome to the show with me, Dave Foster. Hey, Dave, how you doing?
Absolutely awesome, Brett. So good to be here with you.
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to dive in. You know, you're on the other side of the country in Florida, probably one of the most tax-friendly states. I'm here in California, one of maybe the least friendly, maybe that in New York, they probably share that title. But excited to dive into your story. So would you give our listeners a little bit about more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah, it was, you got the gist of it right there. Like we were talking about before the show, there's nothing like a gut level hatred of taxes to turn you into an expert, right? So that's how my story started. I was one of those people that you're talking to and about. My wife and I were both on the corporate train 20 some years ago doing our thing. And this amazing event happened. We had our first son. And all of a sudden, I realized a couple things. Number one, when you have children, you don't need a TV. You just sit and watch them the whole time. They're just so fun. But number two, I realized that as life progresses, the one thing that you have that is the most precious is time. And how you can generate the margin of time so that you can enjoy those moments with your family as they go by was really needed to be my focus. So we started looking for ways that we could generate that time to have more time with family, less time working for the man. And like so many people today, we said, hey, let's become real estate investors. So I bought a fix and flip, a duplex in Denver. I fixed it. I flipped it. I was fat and sassy, baby. I mean, we had made a bunch of money until I went to my accountant that fall. And he said, wow, you realize what you're going to have to pay in tax? And it was at that moment, Brett, that I realized that each of us in real estate investing have the same silent partner. And his name is Uncle Sam. And he generally makes more money than you do. And that just frustrated me to the gills because I realized, well, this plan's not going to work as long as I've got to keep feeding Uncle Sam at the same time. So it was right at that moment in time that a big lawsuit at the highest courts in the land had been settled. And it was going to allow this thing called the 1031 exchange to be used by normal investors to sell investment real estate and buy investment real estate and not have to pay the tax in the middle. And I said, holy cow, that's it. I'm in. Count me in on that. And of course, right at that same time, my really good friends, by the way, you can tell who your best friends are? They're the ones that always have your back, but they're the ones that also feel free to mock you mercilessly. So as they were laughing at me over my tax bill, they said, Dave, we're going to start a business to provide this 1031 service to others. And I said, that's it. Let's go. So that was 20 some years ago. We've never looked back. And I have yet to pay a penny since that time in capital gains tax on real estate, including moving from Colorado to Connecticut to Kansas to Florida and moving onto a sailboat and living on it for 10 years with my family. So I think we figured out how to marginalize that time.
Absolutely amazing. I love that story. And I love the fact that you said we have a silent partner and his name is Uncle Sam. And guess what? He often can take a lot of the profit, right? It could be 30 to 50% capital gains tax and depreciation recapture, depending on what state you live in and what kind of, depreciation you've taken. And it's and how long you've owned it for. And it's just brutal, right? And you're trading time for dollars, right? So at every dollar that you invest and then you're not deferring the capital gains tax, you're literally trading that time that could be away from getting more passive income, which we're going to dive here in a minute, and therefore give you back energy and freedom back, which is really what this is all about. But before we go there, Dave, I want to back up one more step. I want to take you back to, I want you to take us back to maybe the college days or the high school days. I believe we've all been given certain gifts in this life. And these gifts are given to us to be a blessing to others. I think they're God-given gifts. Some people call them superpowers. So maybe it was that one or two gifts that you believe you were given, and how does that help how you help people today?
Wow, that is a great question. I love it. I think that one of the things that, I firmly believe, just like you, these are God given gifts. And through my understanding, knowledge, and learning of what God has in store for me, what He wants for me, I've realized a couple of things. That number one, just like the scriptures say, the two greatest things you can do in the world, in your life, are to love God and to love others. And those are both parts of the same directive that He's given us. But along with that is another proverb that I have gained and claimed for my life, and that is that the three greatest things you can do in life are things you do, not things you say. And those are to do justice, love mercy, and be humble. And so, that's kind of what I've claimed for my life. That's how I want to live my life. And I think what that's done is that's created a pathway of empathy, if you will, so that when I'm working with investors, I'm listening to what their real felt needs are and wants and desires instead of where I want them to be. Because strategy is great, but not if it's your strategy applied to others. So I guess it's that ability for empathetic listening, the ability to be humble, get myself out of the way, and truly try to help others, because honestly, there's no more fun in the world than when everybody's succeeding together. It's no fun to be on top by yourself.
So well said. So much wisdom there, and I can't wait for that book to come out, Dave, because there's just so much golden nuggets there. I love the way you say strategy is great, but not if it's your strategy applied to others, and using empathy to make sure you're understanding, connecting with somebody. I've heard Russell Brunson put it well. That basically until emotionally you connect with somebody, right, on their level from where they're coming from, empathy, right. It's hard for them to even be able to move to that next application, right, or that action step, or that you essentially applying the strategy, right? So,
Right.
is there any thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, you know what? Instantly, a picture in my mind came when my second son was like 7 years old, and we were in the Dominican Republic doing some social work with some folks, and the kids came running in saying, "Your son's laying in the street." And I went, "Whoa, oh my gosh, what's going on?" So I ran out to the street, and here's my son curled up in the fetal position, scared to death. The reason was he didn't speak Spanish. And the other kids around him were so excited to be with this American child. And they were talking a mile a minute, but he didn't understand. So all that happened was there was this disconnect. And he was so scared that he froze. And I think that's kind of exactly what you're talking about, isn't it? We can talk at each other, but until there's that understanding, it's just going to generate fear and caution and hesitancy. But as soon as that first little glimmer of understanding, I said, "Maxwell, they're saying hello, they love you." And he went, "Oh." And the next thing you know, they're all in this cloud of dust, running around like little hooligans, having a great time. As soon as you can get that first bit of understanding, you start to see where the other person is. I think that's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
And I think also too, what I've realized, especially when it comes to tax, when it comes to finances, it only heightens the intensity of nervousness, right? It's almost like people feel like they're walking on thin ice. Like, oh well, just give me the answer, or can I really do this, or is it legal, or am I going to get in trouble with the IRS, and can I really defer all this tax using a 1031 exchange, and and you got to just kind of calm them, slow them down, right? And just but maybe walk us through how you help to not take it to that strategy so fast, and really pull out and connect with them on an empathetic level. What's your best
Yeah,
secret for that?
that's a great question, because I blame the IRS for this, because they don't make it easy to avoid taxes. For that matter, they really don't make it easy to pay taxes. When you think about it, it's the tax code is, I don't know how many thousands of pages. And we always talk about the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion. And tax evasion is doing something you know to be illegal to try and get out of paying tax you should pay. Tax avoidance is using every legal means necessary to avoid having to pay tax that you really don't have to. But what's amazing is that it can feel so much like the only difference between the two is on which side of the door the lock is on. And whether you're in a cell with Bernie Madoff or whether you're on a pedestal cheered by thousands is hard to see the difference sometimes in our tax code. So what I usually try to take people to is the strategies need to be proven. They need to be demonstrated. We've got to look at case law. It's really not so much the tax code itself, but it's where case law has come down over the decades. They're going to give you your opportunities. And then, of course, I always kind of leave it, with a little bit of, it may be better to ask forgiveness rather than permission. Sometimes it's better to ask permission, but no matter what, if the IRS disagrees with you, guess who's right?
The IRS. So that being said, okay, and I love the way you said that, Blake. So tax evasion, tax avoidance, right? Tax evasion is doing something you know to be illegal, right? And not paying the tax that you should be paying. Tax avoidance is using every available legal tax law, right, to that the government actually incentivizes individuals. For example, the 1031 exchange, they want you to sell the property, let's say a 25 unit property, and go move it to a 50 unit property and perhaps renovate and add value and create more jobs and spur the economy, which actually creates more tax revenue, which is the study of macroeconomics. So any thoughts on that, Dave?
Well, interestingly enough, that's actually the entire history of Section 1031. It was one of the original parts of the tax code in 1920. And it was originally designed for farmers, large landowners who were strapped for cash. But yet at that point in the 20s in our country, the growth was just dynamic, and the need for resources, for food, for agricultural business to thrive was incredible. But here were farmers with all the abilities and the desire, but no cash. And if they sold a piece of land to a young and up and coming farmer to get his start, because they wanted to go buy a much larger piece of farm, which was just going to provide dynamic growth, but they couldn't do it because of the tax they would have to pay. So Section 1031 was instituted to allow them to transition fluidly and be able to do that and provide for the growth of our country. So you put it extremely well. In today's terms, young investors, new investors starting out, they want to start small, but they want to keep growing. That's the essence of a healthy economy, is growth. So to do that, though, if they're continually having to reset back to zero or close to zero because of the tax paid, growth is going to be stymied. That's what the 1031 can be great for. But interestingly enough, in all of this talk about what's going to happen next in our country, right? People aren't realizing that the reverse is also true. All of you who are investors out there wanting to grow, and you want to buy bigger and bigger buildings, if Section 1031 happens to go away, what is going to be the incentive for anybody with larger properties to sell to you? They're going to have a huge tax bill pent up. So you're going to see much less growth from people being willing to sell larger properties. And that's, I think, with the real power of the 1031, like you just alluded to.
Yeah, so well said. And it is interesting because, yeah, Joe Biden is potentially going to, he's proposing to take the 1031 or limit the 1031 or do something where it's not going to be favorable, I believe, for commercial real estate investors. Can you just touch on that? What is, I know it's still a lot of, just potential, but what you do know, what you don't know, and what real estate investors can be doing to prepare in case it does change.
Yeah, man, there ain't enough books in the world to tell everything I don't know. But one thing that I do know from my history is that almost every administration has toyed with the idea because the 1031 exchange is low hanging fruit. And as Gideon Tucker once said, no person's liberty or property are safe while Congress is in session. They seem to never have met a tax they don't like. So 1031 has been toyed at. Gosh, I can remember specifically at least 4 different administrations, both Republican and Democrat, that have toyed with the idea of getting rid of it. So it's not that this is new. What I think is more concerning to me is that it's not just 1031, but it's 1031 and bonus depreciation and an increase in capital gains rate and a step and an elimination of the step up in basis, all being talked about at once. Now, so that tells me that the incoming administration pretty serious about wanting to find some tax dollars. But I also know this, that what a president wants and what they end up getting are many times very different things. So I think all those things are on the table and we need to be concerned. You need to be proactive, talking to your representatives, of course. But I'm telling people 3 different pieces of advice. Number 1, be calm because it ain't happened yet and it may not happen. And like Mark Twain said, 90% of the things that I worried about never happened. So I wasted a lot of time worrying. But number 2, that simply gives us a unique opportunity because it's available to us now. So make hay while the sun shines. Don't take advantage of everything you've got because you never know. Well, that's just great advice for everything in life. Take advantage of what you can right now because tomorrow's not guaranteed. And then thirdly would be, plan, start now. And this is the world that I live in and you live in, the strategic planning that to prepare for what eventualities might happen. But just because you're planning a bridge, don't step on it until it's done. So plan and be ready, but operate yourself under what the current law is today. And if you do that, you'll be absolutely successful. And then you and I will all be just kind of waiting and seeing because I don't think anybody really knows how it's all going to play out.
So well said. 3 things. I want to repeat them. Be calm. 90% of what I worried about, Mark Twain, right, never happened, right? So why are we wasting all this energy, right? Just go focus on what's number 2, our unique opportunity to take advantage of what is still on the books right now. Bonus depreciation, 1031 exchange. Now the stepped up basis is interesting, right? Because for a lot of, even as a real estate investor myself, and I know you are too, Dave, and have done, numerous 1031 exchanges, brokerage, all that stuff. One of the biggest thing about the 1031 is, you 1031 drop, get the stepped up basis, and your kids walk away. So there could be folks who've been planning on the strategy for 50 years, 30 years, 20 years, right? And they're they might drop, and hopefully not soon, but and now that potentially goes away. So that is definitely something to be aware of, right? But which is number 3, plan and be prepared, but don't overly, I guess maybe to overly plan, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen until it happens. Fair summary?
Yeah, exactly. Know where your off ramps are and plan. We used to have a mantra in the industry, what we still do for now. That was the 4 Ds in the 1031 world: defer, 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 and die. And, as long as you own a piece of property, you're never going to pay the tax. As long as anytime you sell a piece of property and do a 1031 exchange, you'll never have to pay the tax or depreciation recapture. And then finally, when you die, it's that step up in basis, which really just means that your heirs get the property, the tax goes away. That was a huge legacy building gift. I mean, that's so huge. I used to caution people, be very careful when you tell your kids about it, because they're the ones that are going to pull the plug, right? Now, what's interesting is if the step up in basis goes away, obviously that creates all kinds of problems for the inheritance, but there's off ramps before that. What I think that's going to do is force people to back up and become more entity conscious. So I'm not going to die and give this to you, but let's create an entity like an LLC or an ongoing corporation that you can become the owner of. And over time, so that when I die, you simply are continuing running the entity that has the real estate with all the bent up tax in it. So there's still one thing I know for sure: as long as there's attorneys and a hatred of taxes, we'll figure out how to avoid them legally. It just may look very, very different.
Yeah, very well said. And we call that stepping into your shoes, right? Stepping into the parent's shoes. So you might not get the stepped up basis, but just step into their shoes and continue the tax deferral, which, by the way, it's not actually a bad thing if you think about it, Dave, because how many of us, if we built up 10, 20, 30, 50 million bucks, do we want our kids just to have nothing standing in their way to just cash out, right? Not pay any tax. So I think it's kind of a catch-22, right? I think it's actually going to incentivize to keep the family legacy going and keep that going. Of course, we obviously would prefer the other because they can still, probably still invest. That's a separate thing. They're not going to just spend it all. But I like that, step into their shoes. Now, I want to touch on the estate tax because I think this is something that often gets overlooked with folks that are in real estate, that are 1031ing and just, focusing just like I get the stepped up basis and that's my exit. But they don't separate that the estate tax or the death tax is separate from the stepped up basis capital gains tax, right? So you might, let's say, have a 52 million estate. Let's imagine, Dave, you and your wife, and let's imagine all 52 millions inside of your taxable estate, and it's all in commercial real estate. You die, she dies, you get a stepped up basis for your kids, but guess what? 40% of anything above 22 million will be hit with that death tax. Or as of 2025, it's set to probably expire, or it's set to expire, and it's probably going to drop in half, most believe, down to 12 million married and 6 million single. But let's just assume it stays the same. That 30 million, that's the difference between 52 and 22, is going to be hit with a 40% death tax. What is that? That's $12 million. So although you got the stepped up basis, the kids now have to either refinance and or sell in order to pay that 12 million. So what are your strategies as it pertains to helping to eliminate the death tax there?
Well, yeah, I don't live in that world too much. My main strategy is the comfort of knowing that I won't be around, so I'll just let them deal with it. There's certain things where you're just not going to. And again, I think, I like your phrase, stepping into shoes. The idea of creating ongoing structures so that your children can captain those, because really, you're right. And the studies do show that inherited wealth, whether it's inherited or whether it's quick wealth, like a lottery win or whatever, goes away very quickly, doesn't it? I think inherited wealth lasts maybe 2 generations at the most. So and that's really the old American way, right? Of bootstrapping. building it for yourself. And so there's a lot of wisdom in that, which I go back to the 1031 and saying that's why the 1031 is so valuable, because it lets you, the investor, grow yourself, whether rather than simply becoming the inheritor of somebody else's kingdom, because the 1031 was gone and they had to hold on to the property and give it to you with all the problems associated with it. So I think I shoot for myself right now. One of my main strategies that I'm using this as the carrot to ensure attendance at Thanksgiving and Christmas.
I love that. So well said. And for those who are struggling with the estate tax, we believe we have an amazing solution for that. It's called the Deferred Sales Trust. And although it does not give you the stepped-up basis, it can be structured to move all of your equity outside of your taxable estate, saving you that 40%. I've heard it put this way from the tax attorneys who are experts in the Deferred Sales Trust we work with. You can either have the stepped-up basis, Dave, or you can be outside of your taxable estate, but you can't have both. So this is really interesting, Russ. I'll say that again. So you can either have the stepped up basis, 1031, drop, get it, or you can have it outside the taxable estate, but you can't have both. So the key is, how do you time it in a way? And so in my strategy mind, I'm going, okay, so as long as you're finding deals that make sense and you're not overpaying for properties, right? And all those things are working out and you're adding value and you're building your wealth, well, ride that for the 1031, then sell, go to the Deferred Sales Trust outside the taxable estate, and then the kids step into your shoes, and then they continue on. So anyways, that's just a thought on that. But all that being said, we're running out of time. So are you ready for the lightning round?
Oh my goodness, let's do it.
Okay. So knowing what you know now, Dave, go back to your 25-year-old self. What's the one golden nugget that you would make sure that you would do?
Patience. Time is on your side. Start slow and don't worry about it. Growing it will.
Beautiful. What's the one book you've recommended or gifted the most in the past year?
The Bible.
Beautiful. What's the best real estate advice you ever received?
You make money when you buy. You keep money when you sell by doing it tax advantaged.
Beautiful. What's the best negotiation strategy that you recommend?
Oh, I love this one. This is for me and Altman, by the way, who wrote a book called Same Side Selling. Put yourself on the same side as the other person and make your negotiation based on what you would want if you were them.
Beautiful. Give me a mobile or digital resource you recommend for your business.
www.the1031investor.com.
Beautiful. Favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Mark Twain. I love Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you'll be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things that you did. So cast off the dock lines, fill your sails with air, go explore.
Love that. I love that. What are you curious about right now?
I'm curious about drywall techniques and staining concrete.
Honest answer. Last question, and this is going to encapsulate everything else, and we'll wrap up the show and remind listeners where they can find you. After all your success, Dave, the highs and lows of tax and strategy and helping people, and as well as your real estate, right, and building up the real estate that you own as well, how do you stay centered in your values, and how do you stay encouraged to charge forward to reach new goals?
I have a strong, incredible wife who doesn't hesitate to beat me over the head when I get out of line. That's number one. As I've gone forward, again, I try to go back to the advice that was in the scriptures that say, do justice, so do it right. But love mercy, give others mercy. And no matter what you do, do it humbly. And I try to keep that in my uppermost in all of my transactions.
That's beautiful. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly, right? So, well, fantastic, Dave. I want to thank you for being on the show, sharing a part of your story, inspiration, so much wisdom in such a short amount of time. Would you give our listeners, if our listeners want to connect with you right now or are looking at a 1031 exchange, where can they find you?
Yeah, at the best digital resource available, the1031investor.com. We do have a lot of educational resources there as well. It's interesting. I actually designed this after the last crash in '08 because we've got a new breed of buyer and investor out there. The folks who are investing now were in middle school when real estate was at its last peak. So we've lost a lot of that campfire knowledge of how to conduct real estate, how to invest in real estate, and do these tax kind of things. So we've created it with the millennial mindset in mind, with a lot of videos, articles, resources, calculators. The1031investor.com. Find me there.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Dave, for being on the show. And that wraps up another show of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the Deferred Sales Trust or a 1031 exchange is the best way for you to grow your wealth. Connect with Dave on a 1031 if you have questions. Go to the 1031investor.com to learn more about that. And then if you need help with an alternative or to save a failed 1031, we just did a deal in Georgia, $7.6 million. We saved a failed 1031 exchange into the Deferred Sales Trust. You can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com to learn more about that. And with that, everybody, we wish you well. Please rate, subscribe, and review. Thank you so much for being out there. We appreciate you. Bye now.